All right, and welcome to episode 20 of the Mavericast. 20 episodes?
Nice.
20, that's a lot. That's awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in. First off, right before we get started, I want to state the date of recording. It is March 23rd, 2017, and joining me today is going to be publisher of the paper, Michael Yorgey.
Hey.
Blaise, making his debut on the Mavericast.
Hey guys.
And joining me via FaceTime, Joey Marks is returning to the Mavericast.
How's it going, everybody?
All right, and I'm Andrew, as always. And so, Blaise, since this is your first time on the show, I like to get an introduction from each person. So, what's your, major, hometown, year, future plans?
Hey guys, my name is Blaise Beebe. I'm a politics and philosophy major here at Pitt. I'm from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I'm a freshman. And after I graduate, I plan on going to law school.
Oh, nice.
Cool. And this is another question I ask everybody. What political figure do you most align with, or how would you kind of describe your own political beliefs?
At the present moment, I identify with Donald Trump the most. I follow generally in line with what he believes, but I mean, if we're talking about historically, probably John Adams. I like his observance of hierarchy and his sense of order.
Cool. So also before we get started, if you like what we do here, go ahead and like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram. We have an Instagram.
We do.
Go check that out. Nope, nobody checks it out, but please. No, nobody calls Sean Hannity.
Somebody call Sean.
Nobody checks out our Instagram. Go ahead and do that. I can't laugh. It's so funny. So also, yeah, go ahead and share this on SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube. We put this podcast on everything. So our topic today, I'm calling the episode Intro to European Politics, because we're going to talk European politics over the last 2 years, but I suspect we'll go deeper back than that and very in depth. So we're going to talk about the UK, the Netherlands, France, and Germany over the course of the episode. And each of us sort of have our own experiences with European politics, things we like, things we don't like. Maybe we've traveled there before. So I'll start and go ahead and give mine. I've traveled to Europe. 3 summers ago, I went to France, Italy. But my biggest interest in Europe is actually in the UK. I follow UK politics very closely. For those who have read the pieces I've written about Brexit for the Pitt Maverick would know that. So I followed the Brexit campaign very closely. I followed the 2015 general election very closely, both of which we'll get to today. And recently I've been paying attention to UKIP, which is the Nationalist Party opposite the Conservative Party, and I find them to be very interesting, and I know we'll get into that discussion today too. So, Yorgey, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Europe before, more mainland. I've only been to Austria and Germany. My mom is German. She came when she was 7, so I mean, I don't follow it really closely, but German politics is definitely something of interest, and I definitely am interested in the direction Germany goes and what I like to see of it. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely interested in what Europe has. It's just quite an interesting time.
Go ahead, Blaise.
I've traveled to Europe as well. I've been to Germany, Austria, Hungary, and the Czech Republic. However, I mainly concentrate on German politics. I speak German, and I have a lot of German friends and acquaintances, so, and I'm fascinated with their history and identity, so I really spend a lot of time following their politics.
Okay, Joey, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been to Europe 3 times. I'm pretty close with Germany. I took a lot of German in high school and college, and I've been to Germany a few times. Stayed with a family once there. Been all around Europe. Last year I studied abroad in France, and I speak basic French, better German than French, but I've traveled around Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Spain, France, UK, all around Europe.
That's awesome, yeah. And you've been to Monaco, really cool place.
Yeah, I've been to Monaco and Vatican as well.
Cool. No, I've been to the Vatican too. I think it's funny that my last name Zencraft is very recognizably German, but I don't speak any working German at all. I took Spanish in high school.
Oh, what? Did they offer German?
No, they didn't. I went to a pretty small high school. So also, I want to give a quick disclaimer today. A lot of the parties and topics that we're going to touch on are going to be a little controversial, so we're going to do our best to discuss each one fairly and holistically. If you have any issues with the content of today, whether they be too positive, too negative, not fair enough, go ahead and write me on Twitter. We always put our handles below. And also, you can let us know in comments on any of the formats what you guys thought, what you liked, what you didn't like, and your feedback is very important. And another question before we get into the episode today, What do you guys see as the biggest difference between American politics and European politics? Because for me, I see the system of multiculturalism that's there, and that makes it obviously very different. And also just sort of the wide swath of parties that you have, parties from the very far right to the very far left competing in the same election.
I think that's exactly right, and I really think the European thought right now is that there's a big like culture war sort of going on, and there's a very big divide among most Europeans between like the left, thinking that like there's a very a great egalitarian identity in Europe, and then there's the idea of like people that are centrist and right that take a more traditional view of what Europe should be in the future. So there's a great like question being asked now is like, should Europe be a homogeneous continent like what it always was, or should it now be open and welcoming? And there's a great a spread of ideas through each party, and because they're so representative in their system, there's so many different ideas being put forward.
Yeah, I mean, Europe's not a melting pot as the United States has like claimed to be for the longest time. So we're seeing like there's quite some similarities that Europe and America face in terms of like the recent refugee crisis and similar talking points. But I guess like the real difference is like when it comes down to like like this, what Blaise was saying, like this homogeneous culture where although we're kind of accepting with kind of a difference in it, I would say that what we consider welcoming beliefs and what would Europe consider as like a welcoming belief, I guess would be a little different. Instead of just like, do you like to not kill certain people or whatnot? I think with Europe, in a lot of extreme parties, the questions asked probably go a bit more like radical.
Okay, Joey, go ahead.
I think one big difference between European Union politics and the U.S. tends to be, and we kind of touched upon this on the last episode when we were talking about UKIP, is the terms liberal and conservative and just the way the parties stand is, even though it's somewhat similar in ways to the U.S., it's still very different. Like UKIP is considered far right, but at the same time they agree with things like their whole campaign was they wanted to put money back in NHS.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and it's just kind of weird that they're considered the far right. In America, that would be different. And I think it's kind of interesting how or Angela Merkel, she's part of a Christian political party, which that would be considered more right wing in the United States, but she's considered liberal. So it's pretty interesting how people define things differently in Europe.
Yeah, and I think we'll touch on your point with UKIP that we discussed last time a little bit today, because I think we see similar things with Le Pen actually. Mm-hmm. On economics. She's to the left of most of the other people. So we'll get into that. I wanted to start today with the United Kingdom because that's where I like to put my focus to. And we just spoke about UKIP. So 2 years ago they had their general election. Did you guys pay attention to it at all?
Oh, UKIP's?
It was Conservative Labour. So every seat in Parliament was up for election in 2015.
I only seen like some of it. What was the whole thing?
Okay, so to give a recap for those who don't know, for the entire campaign, polling was very close between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, but the Conservatives pulled ahead at the very end with a surprise win. UKIP targeted like 10 to 15 seats that they thought they could win, but they also ran a candidate in pretty much every single seat across the country, which is part of their criticism. So as a result, they got 12.7% of the popular vote, which is good for third place. I mean, that's monumental, actually, like to come in third place in that system.
Totally.
But they only got 0.3% of the seats because they do single member district plurality voting, which we can explain. So they only received one seat in Parliament, which went to Douglas Carswell. But in a huge driving force behind their seemingly lackluster performance with seats was because David Cameron promised to hold an EU referendum in 2016 or 2017. Obviously, it happened in 2016 to sway UKIP voters back to the Conservative Party. And he kind of used a fear tactic to say that if the Conservatives didn't win, Labour and the Scottish National Party would form a coalition government and be oppositional to them. And I think what's so interesting about that, Cameron had no idea what was coming. I mean, I don't think he expected Brexit to happen,
Definitely
obviously.
not.
Yeah.
I think if he did, he wouldn't have even held the referendum to begin with.
I don't think he knew the powers that he was dabbling into and the level of support that there would be for the movement. Yeah.
Now, I mean, even though UKIP has a small minority in Parliament,
just one seat, yeah.
Do you think that's going to be like real significant? I mean, where do you see yourself, or where do you see UKIP to go now that Brexit is like being enacted?
And that's a great question because I think they almost seemed a little unprepared. Like they got what they were always campaigning for, and they didn't really know where to go from there. Because Farage stepped down right after it happened, saying like, "My work is done. I got what I wanted to do." And now they're sort of in a limbo. And I spoke about this with another person at the Maverick the other day, that they don't really have a sense of direction. They're being pulled between two camps. One camp wants to make UKIP more mainstream. Another camp wants UKIP to stay, so to speak, a radical party. And that's sort of the Farage camp. It's led by Aaron Banks. He wrote The Bad Boys of Brexit, which I reviewed for the Pitt Maverick. I encourage you guys to read it if you're interested in the topic. But his camp of the party wants UKIP to stay UKIP. He wants it to be anti-immigrant and so on. Okay. And I think both sides have very good points because their point is, what separates us from the conservatives is that we're not afraid to talk about issues that people don't want to talk about, and that being mostly immigration. But then the Douglas Carswell camp, which is the other camp of the party, has sort of said, when it comes to immigration, people are going to vote the way they're going to vote, and there's really not a whole lot we can do on top of that. So I think they both have good points, and that lack of unity, I think, is going to hurt them. And UKIP has been ridiculed for being unorganized for a long time because instead of like pouring their resources into 10, 15, or 20 seats in 2015, they spread themselves across the country. And so they would pick up like second or third places just in random elections. But they only got first place in the one. Farage lost a seat in Parliament by just like a couple thousand votes, I think, maybe 2,000 votes.
I guess immigration is definitely, a good path for them to go for a party. But I guess like even just from like a marketing standpoint or even branding, like just imagine you're someone in Britain right now. It's almost getting around a year since the whole Brexit vote, and you were just like, oh, what do you belong to? And it's like, oh, I vote the UK Independence Party.
Yeah.
It's just like,
So that's why Aaron Banks sort of wants to rebrand the movement, and he wants to call it the Patriotic Alliance, which
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'll be curious to see where they go because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the European Parliament elections are next year, and that's UKIP's like biggest thing because since they're an anti-EU party, they dominate in the EU Parliament elections, and that's where Farage currently serves and has served since like the 90s. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go. And since we've hit the Brexit direction, I want to ask each of you how closely you followed Brexit. And for those of you who don't know, I have a Vote Leave sticker on my laptop that's right in front of everybody. So obviously I followed the campaign very closely throughout the early parts of the summer. And I was very curious because, for those of us in the United States, giving up sovereignty to a supranational organization is so foreign to us. It makes no sense to me. And that's why I found myself so interested in this movement. Go ahead, guys.
I followed it very closely as well, probably more closely than the elections in the UK. I was very pleased with the results, to be quite honest. I love the idea of people showing up and voting to secure their sovereignty and regain their independence because, like, the UK was really having a lot of ideas and policies foisted upon it that were not healthy for the UK, namely immigration. They were like the open borders policy and the inability of the English Parliament to even regulate its own borders and like being forced to take refugees or being forced to partake in like different bailouts of like different countries or like
Greece, for example,
right, Greece or like prop up programs that like went beyond economic integration and really were like a political integration, which is beyond the scope of what the European Union is really supposed to be about. And I just love that they chose to leave, and I think that the future's brighter for them as a result.
And I'll hop in for a second, just because I think it's important to establish the history, of the UK, and that's
totally.
They're not, they don't see themselves necessarily as European, and one, they're an island. Two, their connections with the world go beyond the scope of Europe. Having former colonies across the globe, Australia, the United States, Canada, Kenya, India. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. There's some in Central America, like Belize. They have more connections with these countries, the Commonwealth countries, and the United States is outside the Commonwealth, but they're our greatest ally, without a doubt. They have more connections with these countries than they do with Europe. And I think that's what people don't understand, that they don't see themselves necessarily as wanting to be a part of Europe. And that was my interjection, but I'll let Yorgey go.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was happy with the results. I more or less followed it when it came down to the vote as it got closer, which was more when I got out last semester into like the summer. And I mean, it was interesting. I remember when President Obama came in and was talking about that whole back of the queue bit to try to like change things. I remember too when there was that there was like an attack on like some sort of UK official. I remember people were calling it was like a false flag. They were trying to say it was someone like attacked an official and was like Britain first.
Oh, it was a member of Parliament.
Oh,
if I'm
yeah.
correct, yeah.
But yeah, I just remember everything was so interesting, and I guess just from an American perspective, it was just like, I guess just from the significance of the internet had to play with just politics now.
Yeah.
It's just everything's interconnected with everyone's, well, for the most part for the right, everyone's genuine interests are kind of like aligned in some way with European and American politics. So I guess with Brexit getting the win, it's kind of just like the people who supported that were kind of more or less big Trump supporters, so it was kind of just like carrying a hype.
Yeah, sure. And Joey, since you're the one who we would consider the only one we would consider to be left of the political spectrum here, how closely did you follow the Brexit campaign, and what did you make of the whole happening?
Well, I mean, I followed Brexit pretty well up in the summer because I heard a lot about it studying abroad. It was talked about a lot in a lot of my classes, and the one thing I know I've shared this with you, Andrew, before, is my opinion on Brexit was, if I was a British citizen, I would definitely probably support Brexit for a lot of reasons we'll probably get into, that some people already touched on with why would you need to be, sending all this money to other foreign countries when your own country is in crisis, when your own country's economy is hurting. And, that's something that, it seems as though it's a far right thing, but in some aspects with TPP and NAFTA in the United States, it might be considered, kind of a more populist, left position. It just depends on, I guess, who you ask. But to touch on what you said earlier about England, historically, they were always one of the more free countries since the 1200s with the Magna Carta. They were always more free than their neighbors. They always had more economic freedom. They, like you said, they're closer to, countries like Canada and South Africa and Australia, that still have the Queen on their money. They're closer to them, necessarily than sometimes the French or Germans. Now, if I was French or German, or if I was maybe Belgian or Italian, I would probably feel differently about Brexit happening. And, because, the EU started with the French and Germans cooperating with each other. The United Kingdom didn't come until a little bit later. It wasn't one of the original, two members when it, first started.
Yeah, so I want to zone in a couple of your points that are very good. So, and that's a good point that, I think, and this is something we see in the United States, that the Labor Party was out of touch with their own voters. Mm-hmm. I think it was a very large amount, I don't have the exact statistic, but a very large amount of Labor voters went for Brexit. It was close to 50%, if not, it was maybe 30 or 40%. And that's significant because the Labor leaders were the ones who were really getting behind the Remain campaign. And UKIP is wanting to target in on those Labor voters who feel out of touch with their own party. And also about the history, I think you're spot on. And I can remember a moment I was watching one of the debates they had with Boris Johnson and I think he was against Sadiq Khan on the Remain side. And one of the points that the Remain side was trying to make, they were like, nobody's going to want to trade with you after you leave. And the first thing Boris Johnson said was the United States of America. And I think it's funny that in President Trump's first week in office, he met with Theresa May to discuss a free trade deal with the United Kingdom. But yeah, I want to open it up. Whoever wants to go next.
Well, just to touch on before what you said about a lot of the labor people voting actually for Brexit and for like what is not traditionally a Labour position. I just think a general theme that we'll touch on throughout this whole podcast is the idea that people who vote for those Labour-oriented parties have been sold out to political correctness and cultural relativism and like high finance capitalism, and like the idea of like caring for your own people and caring for your own workers and making sure that they could like earn an honorable wage and like have employment and like providing opportunities for them and their families has now been like abandoned, I think, by a lot of people who once like the Democrat Party here or the like Labour Party in the UK or like throughout Europe, all these parties that are supposed to be like more like oriented towards supporting working people. It's just not so anymore, and that it's resulting in a massive political realignment throughout the entire world.
And I was going to use this quote later in the episode, but one of my favorite Nigel Farage quotes was when he said, "I can tell your propensity to vote for UKIP by the earlier the time that you wake up to go to work." And
right.
I think that's funny because but yeah, anyone else?
Oh yeah, I mean, just like the voting demographics with UKIP, like the fact that like all of Scotland wanted to stay was pretty funny, which was interesting. And oh, by the way, Corbyn's part of the Labour Party, right?
Yes, Corbyn's the leader.
He's hilarious.
Yeah.
That dude's like, I don't know, he's kind of like a whack job in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Which I think even though like Farage has like his own personality. Oh well, it's just really interesting because my roommate last semester was British, so I asked him about like the whole thing to keep up. He was interested with Brexit. I think he was more of a Remain guy. But like the one thing he was definitely like a hard hitter on when it came to Farage was if Brexit was going to happen, and I think it was more with most of Britain too, was do they keep their promises with the NHS? And I know even what's it called? Last week tonight, I think John Oliver was talking about like how immediately people were complaining that no money was returning to the NHS because Britain didn't leave the day after.
And I think that's such a good point because and I wanted to talk about this too. There's this like lack of understanding about the way that their system works. I'm not going to say names, but like somebody once was like, because we put a map up of the TTIP, and obviously since the UK is still a part of the EU right now, it was still colored in, and someone asked, why is the UK still colored in? And I was just like, because it's going to take 2 years for them to actually leave. And also with regard to the parliamentary system, where I've had people ask me, why isn't Farage prime minister? And I'm just like, well, UKIP has 1 seat, and it's going to take over 370, I think it's like 376, no, it's less than that. It takes like 326 seats to become the majority party, and that's what it would take to become prime minister. And UKIP will never hit that threshold.
I think that was a thing too, but I mean, I guess this kind of goes more in like the Netherlands thing, but I think that is a problem that people like that affected the Netherlands too, like that people just aren't seeing, and I think that's just like a big American thing with not understanding like you said, the parliamentary system.
Yeah. So and we've been talking about Farage so much, so I want to talk a little bit about Farage and then we'll move on. The most amazing thing for me is that you could argue he's one of the most influential, if not the most influential politicians in the last 30 years in the United Kingdom, but he's never held a seat in Parliament. He once called himself the patron saint of lost causes because he kept losing and losing and losing, and it's only recently that he started winning, as Trump would, he's a winner. But like even in 2015, he lost an election for Parliament. But despite that, he's probably the most influential politicians in the last 30 years, which I think is incredible.
He's been in the EU Parliament for a while though, right?
Yeah, for like maybe close to 20 years in the
I think it was a good thing he didn't that he didn't go into Parliament, because you watch like those compilation videos where Brussels is like a non-country, like those zingers are great.
And that was my question, is what was your first experience with Farage? Because for me it was watching YouTube videos of European Parliament.
It was a combination of those, and then on the internet, like every picture he has holding a beer, he's just got a
yeah.
What were you, Blaise?
For me, it was probably, I think it was 2010, because I re-looked up the video. But if you guys remember Shmo Yoho, like the YouTube channel that would take news segments, would auto-tune the news, they'd make Obama sing and everything. because they were really big back then. And I remember watching an episode, and I had no idea who Nigel Farage was or that he would even be like this important today. But it's the video of him saying, "Oh, Belgium's pretty much a non-country. You have the charisma of a Dan Bragg, appearance of a Lord Ray Bank Clark, all that stuff."
Yeah.
Like it turned into a song. So the first time I heard about Nigel Farage was a long time ago, and then when in the past couple of years when he came up again with Brexit. I was like, wait a minute, that's that same guy from that funny video. I didn't realize that was the same exact guy.
Yeah, it's funny because that had been a couple years. Yeah. So other than that, I remember watching his speech at CPAC in 2015 on YouTube. I wasn't in attendance, but I watched it on YouTube. And then this year, I made like an effort. Like
That was so cool.
he was like my biggest speaker aside from Trump, of course. Like I was like, I'm here for Trump and Farage at CPAC. Like Yorgey knows this. I like moved up progressively throughout, and I got like a seat 2 rows away from Farage.
That was so
Yeah,
cool.
Yorgey was right next to me, and you can actually see me in one of the pictures of Farage on the stage. Yeah, it's pretty cool. What did you make of his speech at CPAC? It was probably my favorite speech outside of Trump.
Oh yeah, it was really fitting after Trump too, because it was just pretty much like he was the rallying, like it was kind of just like Trump's there, it's cool, and then Farage was like the speech was all about bragging rights, like yeah, we won everything. It was so cool.
Yeah.
He's such a great speaker live. It's really different, I think.
Oh, and I've heard that he gives his speeches like with no notes. Like
Impromptu?
Whoa.
yeah,
Wow.
he walks up and just does it. Yeah, that's impressive.
So is it true that he helped prep Trump with the debates?
Yeah,
I heard that, yeah.
That is sick.
he coached Trump for the second debate.
It's amazing.
The because you'd be in jail, 3 versus 1 and stuff like that from the second debate. Like I know Trump and Farage and Ted Cruz were the ones who prepped Trump for the debate, and like I can't think of a better tag
even
team.
Cruz did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Cruz helped him prepare for the second debate. And especially like even though I thought Trump was so comfortable behind in front of the camera, having 2 guys like that prepare you for the debate was incredible. And I think Trump's best performances were the second
It
and
was the
third.
second
Yeah, I
debate.
mean the second debate by far. Because the first one he seemed like all right, like let's just go do this, But he came out, especially after the video leaked 2 days before the second debate. I mean, he went out there and crushed it. Yeah.
That was so cool. I can't now.
Reminiscing on that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, now that I know that they both had something to do with it, that is so, they had no chance.
And the bromance that is developed between Trump and Farage is awesome. He was the first UK politician to visit him after he won the election.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Because
cool.
he campaigned in Mississippi, I remember, during the election, too.
Yeah.
Oh, that was awesome.
Yeah, he spoke at a Trump rally. Top 10 anime crossovers.
Yeah, the one time I saw Trump and they're like, oh, there's going to be a special guest, I looked at my friend and I was like, really hope it's Nigel Farage. It was Rudy Giuliani, so it was still cool, but I was like really hoping it would be Farage.
Yeah, we went to you went to the rally in Wilkes-Barre, but I went to the rally in Ambridge,
Same day.
on
Same
Ambridge,
day.
PA, in the same day. Yeah, and he brought Sessions and Rudy with him. Yeah,
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's who he brought out on mine, too.
Jeff Sessions.
Law and Order.
Law and Order. So we spent a while on the UK, but that's fine. I like that. So this is probably the segment we'll spend the least amount of time on, and that's the recent election in the Netherlands. Did you? I followed it like the last couple of days,
Yeah.
but I didn't really follow it over the course of it. Yeah.
So that's where I think like the Netherlands ran into the problem when you're talking about the parliamentary system, where even though Garrett was getting a lot of popularity,
Yeah.
I think that's what got people on like a global stage, which I think then like kind of, even though like we don't, okay, so like my point is like everyone's thinking Garrett, but no one's thinking about his party and what his party represents. So I mean like even though we don't vote, I would say that the right, or just even like anyone in the world, kind of can lead an influence to kind of like how we think about certain things, and that's where I think and that's where I think it even reflected even in the Netherlands, where everyone just heard Garrett too much, where no one knew anything about they just knew what he represented. They didn't know anything about really what the party was going to do. So I think if there was, in hindsight, if there was a better way he could have sold his party more than just like instead of attaching himself too much.
Yeah. And I think the lack of understanding, like we said, goes for this one as well. Because, I mean, I don't think anybody really expected him to win, obviously, because it would take 50% plus one seats in their House. I think they call it the House of Representatives, for him to become the leader. And there was no way. Like, there was no way his party was going to get that. I think they were hoping to kind of get a plurality and then go from there. So, for those of you who don't know the results, the center-right party got 21.3% of the vote, and Geert Wilders' party got 13.1%. So it was surprising because, with Brexit and Trump, we saw both of those movements overperform their polling, but Geert underperformed his polling. And like I said, he was unlikely to win because no party would form a coalition with him, but his party has increased their number of seats in Parliament.
That's where I don't think that's a big defeat, really. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I just assume with Europe more than America, that especially with like the politics, that there's definitely more of just a left-leaning type of thinking rather than just like, not like anti-PC and stuff like that, just kind of like, like general like a socialist-esque type way of thinking. So that's where I think like this is just a stepping grounds for Europe in a lot of cases, where I think we're France and stuff, we might have surprise elections, but I don't know if this is really a big defeat as people were trying to say it was.
Mm-hmm. And Joey, did you follow it at all?
I honestly didn't follow it too much. I just really heard that he didn't receive, enough, percentage of votes. That's all I really heard about the election.
And for those of you who still don't know, who are listening, I would say Geert might be the most controversial politician in the world. Would you guys agree with that?
Did you know that?
I probably would. Yeah.
You know that he lived before. I don't know what he does now, but like when he was on like the campaign trail and whatnot, that he lived in different houses each night.
Yeah.
There's an actual radical Islamist group that threatened to kill him.
He wears a bulletproof vest every time he leaves the house, and he has a security detail. He's been living like this for the past decade, if not longer.
Yeah, I've heard he has to be followed by police.
By everybody.
Yeah.
Which is admirable, I think. I mean, like he won't be intimidated. He's saying like you can't take our Dutchness away from us, and he won't like back down because of violence or like he won't be intimidated. It's very applaudable. And
so central to his rise and his political rise, I know he separated from the center-right party after the center-right party backed Turkey joining the EU like a decade ago, or like as Blaise said. So I want to tie in Erdogan's recent comments. So Erdogan recently said that Turkey is the future of Europe. He called for Turks to have more children, and he called the Dutch Nazi remnants. And there's a New York Times article. If you don't believe me, I will put that below. I mean, this is what I think. Like, this was one of Geert's largest points, is that Turkey will not be a member of the EU. And I don't know what you guys think, but I don't support. I don't have a say, but I don't support it. Yeah.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, this is interesting too. I mean, this type of conversation, like the type of dialogue that's being said, is like with what Erdogan's saying, like the future of Europe and stuff.
Yeah.
It's a lot of far right talking points that I think, like, if we're speaking of just like left right, like the left would not like this stuff. I mean, if we're thinking about like stuff in America, they would say this type of stuff doesn't exist. Like, we're not worried about like this type of thinking. And
no.
I mean, I don't like Turkey. I think them in the EU wouldn't do well, and personally, I think Erdogan's a jerk.
Yeah,
but,
and there's another referendum coming up that will increase Erdogan's power.
Oh my God!
I mean, he's becoming a dictator.
I'd say he's already there.
I think he is too. Yeah.
I mean, he's what he's saying is extremely dangerous because he's trying to weaponize demographics.
Yeah, absolutely.
He wants to use demographic change as a tool or like a sort of leverage to gain more influence in Europe. And I would just say, like, speaking of Turkey, generally speaking, like throughout history, I don't know why they would have a place in the European Union. I mean, like, the Ottoman Empire was no friend to Europe. Like, say what you will about Europeans fighting each other, but like Turkey is a very distinct, like, just because it's adjacent over the Strait of Bosphorus to Europe doesn't mean that it has a place in the European Union culturally or like in any sort of respect. So I think what he's saying about sort of taking over European countries through like Turkish like birth rates or influence of Islam is very dangerous, and it has to be combated in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he's been using the refugee crisis, of course, as leverage over the European Union. Absolutely. Joey, what do you think?
I was just gonna say the interesting thing about Turkey is, like we talked a lot about this in one of my European Union classes abroad, is that Turkey is actually in a customs union with the European Union, so they essentially can trade almost everything freely, except for I believe agriculture is one of the main ones they can't. So a lot of the reasons for Turkey, I mean, they could be cultural, but a lot of them too are economics. Plus, it's the third world country, a developing country by definition. Its GDP per capita is nowhere near as high as countries like France or Germany or Italy, or even countries probably like Greece or Eastern European countries that joined within the last 10 years.
Yeah, see, that's what I thought was like going to be the problem with Turkey is that when they admit to the EU and you practically don't need a passport, like you're going to have such an influx of migrant workers, like it's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so population, they would have more people than I believe Germany is the most populous, and they have more people than Germany.
Oh,
so.
actually, yeah. I knew Germany's the most populous, but I didn't know Turkey had more people. That's interesting.
I can search that right now.
That's going to be my what did I learn today at the end. So I think we've hit a lot of points. There isn't really much to say for the Netherlands, but I'm glad we get to touch on Turkey here while we did.
Mm-hmm.
So next up is going to be France, which this is going to be huge. So Le Pen, Marine Le Pen, leader of the National Front, is calling it the third battle after Brexit and Trump. Hollande, Francois Hollande, the current prime minister, is extremely unpopular. Unemployment's very high in France. I mean, it's ridiculous, especially among the youth. And I mean, the recent terror attacks, Nice, Paris, the list, Charlie Hebdo, the list just kind of goes on. And I think this is priming the pump for somebody like Le Pen to be successful. So the main candidates are Le Pen, of course, from the National Front. Fillon they're called the Republicans, so they're actually quite similar to the Republican Party here. And the centrist Macron, who's only 39 years old. So did anybody watch or read about the debate?
Only a bit. I know Macron and Le Pen were going at it for a bit, but I don't know. I didn't know anything about the performance of them. I don't know if anyone else did know.
I've heard that obviously the focus was between the two of them. I've heard Fillon is kind of like he's out of it. Like people know it's going to be Macron and Le Pen who move on.
Who's Fillon? Where's he belong to?
He's the center-right Republicans.
Oh, so do you think that they're going to go to Le Pen? If he's
his
out?
Supporters?
Yeah, if you think it's either two.
That's tough. I mean, I don't because Le Pen's camp certainly thinks so.
Yeah.
But I don't really know.
A lot of my French friends who did support him, I could not see them supporting Le Pen, but those are just people that I know. I don't know if that's the whole support base.
And that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, any first-hand experience is great. So while you were there, did you have any experiences with the race developing or anything like that?
Honestly, more people were interested in Trump because that was during the primaries. So, because I was there in the spring of 2016. So I was more asked about Trump myself. I sometimes heard things about Le Pen, and I kind of learned more about who she was while I was there. But most of the discussion was either Brexit or Trump, as far as international politics go. Because I guess it was still a little too early for the French maybe to be.
It was still developing at that point.
Yeah.
So otherwise, Le Pen's, like, one of her biggest comments from the night was, I want to put an end to immigration, legal and illegal, and also the burkini came up at one point. That issue seems to not be able to go away in France. And so, Joey, while you were there, I want to address you again. Do you think, that it's being primed for someone like Le Pen, the youth unemployment, the recent terror attacks? What do you think?
I think because of the recent terrorist attacks, you could make a case and a strong prediction of her being successful, and it could also be a Trump style upset like we had in the Anglo world, but the thing is, France is usually kind of stereotyped as a very liberal country, and I guess it is in a lot of aspects compared to the U.S., but compared to a lot of its neighbors, especially Germany, it's really not. And because both France and Belgium, they passed laws on different types of burqas and different type of Muslim headgear you can wear. Like in the U.S., you would never see a law like that even existing.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's other things like in France, marijuana is actually still considered a crime, and it's not legal like it is in some states in the U.S. And there's little tiny things here and there that are actually a little more conservative in France than in the U.S., which I always thought was interesting because a lot of people think, oh, because of the Iraq War and stuff, France is the most liberal country on earth. But there are the factors in Europe that are very conservative are not just your average conservative, they're usually very far to the right, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Maybe not as many of them in numbers necessarily, but the people who are very much enthusiastic and very much conservative in that thinking.
And I think, yeah, and that's what we've been centering on a lot today. So polling, of course, is saying that Le Pen is likely to win the first round of the election, but lose the second round. And we can talk accuracy of the polls, so on. So her campaign against Macron, I think this is from the New York Times as well, that they want to portray Macron as part of the globalist elite. That was quotes. She would like to come at him from the right on the social side of things and combat him on the left on economic policy. So she's coming at him from both angles, I guess. And that's why, they're saying, the demographics of people who are voting for Le Pen are similar in some respects to Trump and Brexit, working class, sometimes mostly older, but also Le Pen has strong youth support. I think she's winning a plurality right now among youth, 18 to 25, yeah.
So...
Go ahead, sorry about that.
Oh, no, go right ahead.
I was just going to say, if I could also share, the one thing that did kind of blow me away that I didn't really expect until I started talking to people from France is I always thought Francis Hollande was like a fairly popular president, but a lot of people that even consider themselves maybe more liberal or socialist, they didn't like him because of they kind of viewed him kind of as like, I guess, a failure, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
because he didn't really, I guess, do all the things he promised, and he didn't really change a lot, and then the terrorist attacks just made everything worse.
And his approval ratings are in the single digits, and I can find a source.
I didn't realize he was that unpopular until I went there. I honestly thought he was just, I didn't really think much of it, I guess. I didn't think, like, oh, if he's hated or loved. I just thought, oh, he's just, he's just their president. But I guess, because I had a lot of people tell me, they're like, oh, no, we don't like him. He's lazy. He doesn't really do anything. And when he does do stuff, he messes up. So
I know he has, like, mistresses as well in different places. But
and a lot of... sorry about that.
Oh, no, you're fine. We're going to talk. There's a delay, so we're talking over.
I was just going to say, a lot of people also felt that his response to some of the terrorist attacks with sending, strikes over in the Middle East and North Africa, a lot of French people didn't necessarily agree with those actions. And they kind of viewed him as kind of going more a little towards the right as far as being like a war hawk. Interesting.
And one of my experiences from when I was in France that I can use, because a couple podcasts ago we talked about the difference between multiculturalism and the melting pot, like we should have here. And there's a common experience in French cities, especially, that many of the migrants are young men. They don't speak French. They don't really have an intention of learning French, and I think that has been rubbing sort of the National Front crowd obviously the wrong way. And I think it's contributing to the unemployment. Just that the unemployment exists as it does. So other than that, what would a Le Pen win look like? Because I think it's worth considering at this point in time. Frexit potentially could happen.
That is something.
That would be the nail in the coffin for the European
I think so too. Union. That was the question I wanted to ask. I mean, if that happens, it's just Germany and then like a collection of lesser powerful countries.
Wouldn't really matter anymore. Yeah. Germany would lead to then, I think, at that point.
And I think Italy would be next after France.
Oh yeah. Who's that guy? That Berlusconi guy? Is that who the run?
He was prime minister.
He was before.
He was before. Okay.
Renzi was Renzi was prime minister. But they had a referendum in Italy, which like Farage called third. He called it like the third win because the referendum was about drastically changing their constitution and the structure of their government, and it was like being instituted by the EU. And Renzi promised that if it passed, he would resign, or if it failed, he would resign. So the motion failed. So people saw it as a vote of no confidence in Renzi. So that's why he's no longer there. And so there's a famous picture from just 2016 with Hollande, Obama, Cameron, Merkel, and Renzi, of course. And the photo's so famous because all of them except for Merkel will be gone this year. Yeah, and Merkel could potentially be gone too.
So soon.
Yeah, and that's our segue to topic number 4, which is Germany. We're running up on time today, but that's okay. So Blaise, I'm giving you pretty much full reign on Germany, and the rest of you guys follow it pretty closely. So go right ahead.
Well, Germany has been seeing a big shift in its political climate lately. The 2017 parliamentary election in Germany is coming up pretty soon, in September, I believe. Mm-hmm. And a lot of Germans really have seen Angela Merkel as failing in her task of keeping Germany as like a stable country, and they really don't like the way she handled the migrant crisis in many respects. And I mean, like, they agree that they would take in what amounted to hundreds of thousands of refugees, and that they would monitor where they were and try to assimilate them in the best way possible. Mm-hmm. But none of that really happened. They even lost track of many of them. And the open borders policy of the EU has led to like terrorist attacks in Germany as well. And like Germans are being displaced in a lot of German cities. And there's just a lot of really like loss of trust in the establishment. And that's in the elections we could expect a lot of competition between the Christian Democratic Union, which is Angela Merkel's party, mm-hmm. and the Social Democrat Party, which is the center-left, but pretty left by American standards. Right now, the CDU is ahead a little bit in the polls, but it's not a comfortable lead. And there's also a third party that's making a big impact, the AfD, which is the alternative for Deutschland. And they're Eurosceptic and nativist. They're pretty far right. And they're down 11%, which is far above the 5% threshold, which you need to be represented in the Bundestag. So, what do you guys think regarding that? I mean, what do you see happening in Germany?
I think what's interesting, this sounds like the 2015 UK election all over again. I could see Merkel either pivot to the right or move to the right, and she already has moved to the right on some issues, to kind of maybe gain a little bit more support from the AfD crowd, and that's what Cameron did with UKIP. I think we could see sort of a replay of that over again.
I think she didn't she implement a ban recently? Didn't she also impose a ban, like a burkini ban?
Yeah, I think it's a burqa, or she said she supports a burqa ban. Right. I don't think it's instituted yet. Yeah,
it's on the table, which is a big pivot from like what she would have otherwise said.
Yeah,
I think
because I mean like. I don't know, like, my mom's German, she doesn't like what Merkel's doing, and it seems like a lot of Germans that come here, or that are Americanized, seem to, like, dislike it, but, like, do you know anything, Blaise, about, like, the German citizen perspective? Like, do they more in part agree with what she's doing, or is there, like, a growing sentiment of not liking this?
Well, again, this is sort of anecdotal, but I mean, like, the Germans that I know, generally speaking, do not approve of the way she's handling the current affairs in Germany, and they mainly point to Islamic terror and the migrant crisis, because they just don't see their interests being represented, and they're being told that they can't have a German identity, sort of, and they have to welcome everybody, and that they can't be proud. Like, that's sort of a German theme. It's not Merkel's fault only, but like a lot of them are now saying, wait, this is enough. Like, we need to rethink how we're doing this. And
I can remember a video of her snatching German flags.
Oh, yeah. I hated that one.
Yeah, it's terrible. Really, I mean, I have a good friend. Who was an exchange student in my high school. I still keep in touch. I visited him in Germany, and his father, and he as well, and his whole family, they are like pretty moderate politically, but they were happy that Trump won, and they also support some sort of. They don't support the AfD. I know they vote CDU mostly, but they definitely want to see change in the party leadership, and they want to see Germans represented more, because like really Europe is. Every story is the same that we're saying. There's like a common theme that like there's the forgotten man, as Farage would say, the forgotten people.
Yeah, Joey, do you have anything?
Well, yeah, the one thing I think is kind of interesting about Merkel is I remember like when the Euro crisis first started. I want to say maybe 6-7 years ago, maybe when Greece started to go under, and people were like, "Oh, is the European Union going to survive? Is the euro as a currency going to survive?" She was actually seen as, with austerity, she was actually the conservative voice in the European Union. So it's interesting to see that now, because some states want to leave, like UK and maybe France, if Marie Le Pen and Italy, was talking about it. It's pretty interesting to see that, she went from being that more, conservative figure to now the liberal figure. And I think that's pretty interesting that she's trying to backtrack on that now, so she can, be more successful in the next, election.
And so, Blaise, what does the prospects of the election look like? If you just say right now what you think would happen, what do you think?
It's very close right now. The last poll I saw from Reuters, they were all like the CDU and the SPD were in 3 percentage points with each other. The SPD has a lot of internal problems as far as like organization and direction goes. There's two different camps really. There's a radical faction and then there's a pretty moderate faction. I could see the CDU maintaining the majority. I could also see the SPD taking over, or I could see a pretty even split happening, and the AFD taking a pretty sizable chunk. And again, it would be similar to a UKIP victory, maybe a little bit bigger. It would be around 11%, or unless the prospects increase. But there's a long time until the election.
Yeah.
So if SPD, let's say like they take it, what do you think is going to change? What do you think changes? I'm not as real versed in what they want. Are they for like the same things in terms of like immigration, like the hard hitting stuff?
I'd say they're not as hard hitting. I'd say they are more progressive socially, but it's interesting because they do have that working class like vibe. You know what I mean? They definitely. Would you agree with me, Joey, on that about the SPD?
Yeah, I guess I would say that's a fair statement. Yeah.
So I think definitely they would try to implement more like social welfare programs as well and try to extend them to migrants maybe. But it's interesting because a lot of the Germans are being displaced in labor by the migrants. So then they're sort of in a tough spot there. Who would they side with? It would be an interesting development. But for sure the AFD is anti-Euro, anti-immigration, like pro-German. They even want to reinstate conscription in the military.
Interesting.
They're pretty traditional, yeah.
Yeah. So this is going to be something to follow over the next couple of months for sure. To see how Merkel goes about this. And what did you make? Because you guys are well versed in Germany. What did you make of Merkel's conversation with Trump, the press conference? What did you think?
Right, they wouldn't shake hands, right?
Yeah.
What was that? Even though it was like 40 chess.
Yeah.
I thought it was good. I mean, the fact that he admitted is like, yeah, you're not paying your fair share. And she's like, yeah, you're right. She's like, we're gonna do that now. So
and is that with NATO?
Yeah, they're gonna put at least 2% now, or pick up like the percentage GDP to start contributing to NATO.
Well, I think what we have to understand with Germany and like Japan and those countries is like we like made their constitutions so that they cannot have a military really. Like they're allowed to have one. Like the Bundeswehr exists, but like it really like constitutionally it cannot be used for offensive operations. Yeah. So it was like. And it has to be like capped at a certain amount. So.
I take a foreign policy class, and I think the only like German intervention was in Bosnia, and that was because it was with NATO along the way. Yeah.
What is
troops to Afghanistan?
They troops to Afghanistan.
They did, yeah.
Yeah, because what is GSG9? What are they allowed to do?
They're anti-terrorist, so they're mainly in like Germany.
So they're internal, correct?
They do both. I mean, like they're internal, but like I think that they're like a special forces branch that could also operate in Afghanistan, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that one. But I mean, like they would have to change their constitution. Like we'd have to allow them to have a bigger military. Like because like we sort of have to protect them, unless we want to allow them to rearm. Same thing with Japan.
I don't know. Like, do you like? Of course, we're gonna the big talking point if like what for Japan and Germany is be like, oh, it's the 1940s again. But like,
I think they're probably done with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think Merkel is like wants to remilitarize the Rhineland.
Right.
All right, so I think we can cap our discussion today. We're running up on time. So we started out talking about the differences of the two continents between our politics and their politics, and so I guess my question, and I think I already know the answer to this, is this kind of politics potentially coming here with someone like the rise of Trump? Steve King's tweets from a couple weeks ago, and I think Bernie resembles the politics of a Nordic country more than he does of here. So I think that's interesting, and I think it's going to be something to watch. I want to thank you guys for coming on today.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.
And so if you like this episode, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button on SoundCloud. We're on iTunes and we're on YouTube. Like our page on Instagram. I'll plug that again. And if you have any ideas for future episodes, please put them in comments. And if you're interested in contributing on Patreon, we'll provide a link so you can do that as well. And so my question every week, what did you learn on the Mavericast today? And I said mine earlier, and that was that if Turkey were to join, it would have...
I actually looked that up. I was actually wrong. Germany has like 80 and Turkey has 79. For some reason, I thought they had more, so that's actually my fault.
Close
enough.
I learned close enough. Still larger than I expected.
Yeah, it would be a large chunk. I mean, obviously larger than all the other European countries.
Repeal and replace. What did you guys think? What did you learn today?
That there is a growing tide in Germany of people saying they're fed up, and I was surprised. Usually we're just led to believe that everyone's like far this or that from just what the media paints, and I was surprised to see the real face of Germany.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
What did you learn?
What did you learn today?
The Turkey fact as well. I even though it wasn't larger, I had no idea that it was that monumental, like population-wise. That would be huge because I know Germany, for example, has it's like 1/4 the size of the United States, but 1/2 the size of Texas. So it's a lot of people crammed in there. So like Turkey would just like open the floodgates, and I think it would be a big like actual land issue.
And because of the Schengen area with free movement of people, that would be an issue. Joey, what did you learn today?
Oh, yeah, I wanted to point out, I forgot to say that, but I wanted to mention that earlier because the UK was never even a part of the Schengen movement. You know?
You're correct.
And they never even had the euro. I was going to mention that earlier, but I forgot.
And that just furthers our point that culturally, historically, they've been so separate from Europe. But I'll let you finish.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, I didn't realize, I can't remember which one of you guys mentioned about Merkel doing a ban on, Muslim headwear. I never heard about that before, so that was something I learned. I didn't know she was, like, going kind of against what she normally says about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right? I think there was, like, talk about that, like, around the fall. I was like, how are you letting people in and then banning their headwear? What?
So...
Really, cool thing to say.
So I'm going to repeal my original, what did I learn? I'm going to replace it with, I learned that I think we all had a very good discussion about controversial matters that not everybody can have civil conversations about. I think we looked at what are these movements, what are their policies, and I think that's the best we can do. I mean, Joey, since you're our Piers Morgan here today.
That's not...
do that. Yeah.
Do you think we gave him a fair shake? We didn't.
I mean, you know what I'm going to say, Andrew? I don't normally say this, but I mean, you have the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk, and you have the charisma of a damp rag, and I don't think you're a friend to nation-state democracy because you're from Belgium. This is pretty much a non-country.
I think I'm a globalist now.
The globalist.
All right. Thank you guys again for tuning in, and we're going to see you next week right here on the Mavericast.